Good late afternoon. Let me call to order the regular City Council meeting for the City of St. Helena for April 24, 2018. Mr. Doring, would you lead us in the pledge?
Place your hand over your heart and pledge along with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mayor Galbraith?
Here.
Vice Mayor White?
Here.
Councilmember Doring?
Here.
Ellsworth?
Here.
Coberstein? Here.
All right. The next item on our agenda is public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address us with respect to matters of municipal concern that are not on our agenda, and public comment is limited to 3 minutes per item. Is there any public comment? Mr. Belt?
Yes. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mayor, council members. My name's Tom Belt. I live at 1520 Hillview Place. I'm here this evening to ask the City Council to consider endorsing Measure C. That is, as you know, the Water and Oak Woodlands initiative to try and help protect our water in Napa County. I spent nearly 3 hours today driving around the Angwin area with a very, very nice person who informed me and showed me about how many existing vineyards and wineries are out of compliance with their erosion control plans, and how calls to the county, I've been told, they're not really responding to those calls, and they say what I've heard before: there's not enough people, there's not enough time, we can't get out there and do it. And I really believe that, because I placed 5 calls into the Napa County Planning Department last week because I wanted to know how many wineries and active vineyards are operating in our Bell Canyon watershed. I found out from reading a 2014 Bell Canyon watershed survey that was done, as I said, in 2014, that there were 9 active wineries and vineyards at the time, and the engineers who wrote that survey basically said that the wineries, vineyards, and fire pose the greatest hazard to the integrity of our reservoir in Bell Canyon. As you know, in the 1980s, there was 2 major spills that occurred, and from what I've seen today and what I've been hearing and learning, we need to take more. When I say we, the people need to take more effort and get the county to do more work in trying to conserve and preserve what watersheds we have left, because they're very important for the future. I did some research, and I found in 1959, when our Bell Canyon Reservoir was constructed, it had a capacity of 2,530 acre feet. According to the 2014 survey that was done, it has 2,250 acre feet now, or then. And I went into Public Works kind of off the cuff and asked if they knew how much silt was in the bottom of our reservoir now, and you know, it caught them by surprise. They don't know, so I've put in a public records request for that to try and get that information. But if it's true that it's 2,250 acre feet today, that means that 11% of our capacity has been lost. And I don't need to tell any one of you today that Bell Canyon is our major source of water. And in the future, we need to make sure that anything that's been built up there is working under their protection plans for erosion. And I would just ask, thank you, I would ask that you consider, City Council, to endorse this measure, because I believe that the measure is going to need all the help it can get, because there's a lot of big money trying to defeat it, and they're using things that just don't make any sense, like it's going to increase traffic and it's bad for agriculture. Thank you very much.
All right. I certainly,
thank you.
As I've publicly endorsed Measure C, I certainly think it is a matter of municipal concern, and I would ask that the staff schedule a session on Measure C either at our next council meeting or perhaps if we have a very full agenda at our next council meeting at 4:30 or 5 before the council meeting on the first Monday in the first Tuesday for our council meeting in May, which I think is May 8th. We'll take a look at the agenda on Thursday that we plan to have, and we'll schedule a session, Mr. Bell. Is there any further public comment?
Good evening, everyone. Mike Hackett. I live in Angwin. Although I don't live here, I thought it appropriate that you see the face, one of the faces behind Measure C. I was one of the co-authors of that with Jim Wilson, and we've been working on this since 2015. And there's a lot of criticism of it being an initiative versus the county taking control and having some action on this. However, it's been 3 years, and it seems like that's not going to occur. Another benefit of this is once we get it into policy, it can't be changed by the whims of maybe 3 development-styled Board of Supervisors. So it's locked in and will actually provide long-term protection for St. Helena's water resource as well as all the other ag communities and also the other cities' involvement in their reservoirs. Interesting that we have self-contained reservoirs. All of our cities are pretty lucky to have those reservoirs. Some visionaries in the past dammed them up and made this all happen. Just like your reservoir, take a look at what's happened in Rector Reservoir. 1/3 of it has been diminished in capacity due to sedimentation. That's a serious thing you have to deal with, and our Measure C will help improve that situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hackett. Any further public comment?
Hello, my name is Trent Iaconelli. I'm the Executive Director for the Boys and Girls Clubs of St. Helena and Calistoga at 1420 Tainter. And recently, the last week or so, I was 2 weeks ago, was up in Oregon. We were with 30 teenagers that we had taken up here from St. Helena. And one of the things we did at night, at the end of the night, we would had a candle bowl, and the kids would light a candle and say what they were grateful for in their day, in their moment, for their parents or whatever it was that they felt moved by. And as we finished out the week, one of the kids sat next to me as I waited for all of them to move on to their cabin, and he said, I just want to thank you for noticing us and paying attention. And I was grateful for that moment. But the reason I'm here is that as teen services have been pulled back by the city, and as a teen community has come to us and sat down with us and asked, we need a place to go, and we have stepped forward, the Boys and Girls Club stepped forward, and we're providing that space right now. We went from about 4 or 5 kids to suddenly we're serving over 60 kids at times and averaging over 50 within a 3-month, 4-month period. But I need support from the city. I think the police.
We've got this on our agenda, so you're going to have an opportunity to speak to this when we get to that part of our agenda.
Not about teenagers.
Pardon?
No, not about this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I think any police force will tell you that if you have an active teen center inside your community, juvenile crime goes down. And the issues that we're dealing with on a daily basis have become where we have now taken, I've invested over $120,000 in staffing and support for our teens and this community's teens. And what I'm looking for eventually is to have some communication with, I've had some, but I would like to have more about space, the space that we need right now. We're in a one classroom. As you discuss what's best for this community, that we start talking also about space and possible further resources. The city of Calistoga, when they were having issues, they actually contracted with us where they gave us $30,000 a year to run their teen center program. We provide all the staff. Obviously, it costs a lot more than that to run. So that's been something that I would like to just put on the table. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Any other further public comment?
Hi, my name is Nick Haley. I'm a Sonoma resident. I was hired by the Boys and Girls Clubs in February, specifically to bolster what Trent is talking about. So there was a need identified for high schoolers and middle schoolers in St. Helena. I ran a nationally recognized teen program in Sonoma Valley that served over 300 students for college, career, and mental health services. So I just wanted to give you a little context on what we've been doing. Since I arrived in February, the average daily attendance that we have has gone from 38 teenagers to 52. We have 191 total students enrolled in our program, and that's not drop-in students, so that can be the number can be higher. And Trent alluded to the retreat in Oregon, which was a big ticket, but we've added art programs, healthy cooking, active games, things to get kids engaged and involved with our staff. In a response to some of the behaviors and the things we saw with our kids, there's suicide, depression, and poor academic standing. We added study nights 2 times a week, and we hired myself and 3 other staff to serve these students. So I just wanted to give you context. I actually brought some of our dashboards that we share with our board if you'd like to take a look at them.
Yeah, please. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Further public comment?
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Beth Novak-Milliken, and I'm just here to quickly talk about Measure C. I understand that there is an opportunity for our City Council to put its support behind the Yes on C, which is I am part of a group called Growers/Vintners for Responsible Agriculture, and our interest, obviously I'm in agriculture. My family has Spotswood Winery, and I run that. And I'm very much obviously a supporter of agriculture and wineries in this community. Our support for Measure C comes from our desire to protect our ag watershed. Obviously, our water supplies in St. Helena rely on a healthy Bell Canyon reservoir. And additionally, entirely in our county, our water supplies rely on a healthy watershed. And the Oak Woodlands Initiative is in place and has been put forth in particular to support those efforts to protect our ag watersheds. So I hope that our City Council will be brave enough to actually come forth and support this measure because, of course, it helps our own community, but beyond our own St. Helena borders, and I know that is not your purview, but beyond that, it helps the entire Napa Valley and Napa County. And so I hope that you will consider supporting Measure C. Thank you so much for giving me this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further public comment? All right. Let me close public comment and turn to reports by staff, City Council future agenda items, and AB 1234 reports. Let me start with the City Manager, Mr. Prestwich. Okay.
Thank you. Just an update on the SHAPE Committee. Over the past week, we held additional focus groups, I believe, with the inclusion of our executive staff. That was a total of 8 focus groups. More than 70 people in the community participated. So I want to thank the community members for all the time they gave to that process. Their recommendations are being compiled and will be shared with the SHAPE Committee tomorrow night. The next meeting is tomorrow at 6:30 in this room at Vintage Hall. The assets that will be talked about, and in this order, will be City Hall and the police facility, which is attached to City Hall, our library, the Adams Street parcel, Railroad Avenue properties, which includes our teen center, recreation offices, and our public works office in the CDF building, the Carnegie facility, as well as the fire station. That's all.
It's a substantial agenda.
It's ambitious.
Ms. Mitz?
I would just like to give another reminder that on May 9th is our budget workshop session, and it is going to be at the fire station from 9 o'clock in the morning until noon, and we should be able to have our proposed budget published by the end of this week for everybody.
All right. Mr. Fopoulos?
Good job. I just wanted to report that I sent out a recruitment flyer today for boards, committees, and commissions. I've got flyers and applications in the back of the room, and I encourage everybody to share the information, and hopefully we'll get a robust amount of applications.
All right. Mr. Brown? Nothing else. All right. Mr. Hausch?
briefly, I just want to remind everyone that the scoping period for the general plan EIR is coming to a close on May 1st. And so if you have any comments on the scope of that document, please provide them to me, and my contact information is available on the Planning Department's website. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Smithies?
I just wanted to post that the city is hosting a Bike to Work Day on May 10th. We'll give you more updates on a reminder at the May 8th meeting, but it'll be in front of the Carnegie Building, a little filling station with some food and treats for folks and students that are biking to work and school that day.
Okay, good. Ms. Silverstein? Mr. Ellsworth?
Thanks. I've got a few things. First, I wanted to report briefly on a few meetings that occurred since our last city council meeting. Both I thought were very successful. One was the Up Valley Community Leaders Coalition that was chaired by the Up Valley Family Center, and it's a group of government, community, and faith-based groups from around the Up Valley. We had a good conversation about countywide coordination in disaster preparedness, with a focus on the Napa Valley COAD, which is an acronym for Community Organizations Active in Disaster. So it's an ongoing conversation about best possible tools and communication in the event of a disaster. So that's happening. And then there was a NICLOG meeting, and that's an acronym for Napa County League of Governments. And that was a presentation by the Pepperwood Preserve in Sonoma County on watershed health and wildlife habitat, and how those issues cross through different jurisdictions. So I thought that concept of regional thinking appropriate at the NICLOG event, which is, it's an opportunity for administrators and elected officials from Napa County and all the separate cities to interact with each other in looking at regional issues. So that I thought was very good. And then I'm also continuing to work on promoting a Napa Water Symposium, which is going to happen on May 17th at Napa Valley College, co-sponsored by the college and the Susquehanna Intertribal Council, and we'll be talking about water sustainability, water security, and some of the headwaters issues that were brought up earlier. The realization that Howell Mountain is a headwaters for both our Bell Canyon Reservoir, that's municipal water source for St. Helena, and also Lake Hennessy, the municipal source for Napa. So that's going to happen on May 17th, and more information at Napa Water Symposium 2018. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Doring?
I don't have anything with respect to any of the meetings I've attended, but the issue of the teen services seems like something that our staff should maybe agendize so that we can get more recent information about what is going on there. I frankly don't have enough information, but seems like it's something to have a general discussion to move that item forward. City Manager, thank you.
We can certainly agendize that for future discussion, and just so the council knows, the recreation director, myself, the school superintendent, representatives of the Boys and Girls Club are attending a meeting tomorrow. I believe I have that on my calendar. I think that was scheduled. And so it's an outcome of some discussions that we've had. And I was anticipating that from that would emerge a need for a discussion anyhow. So thank you.
Good. Mr. Watt?
Yes. So last week at our Napa Valley Transportation Authority's meeting, Caltrans gave a presentation on a pavement repair project that they've already started with. If you notice, going between St. Helena and Napa, some work has been done on culvert pipes and drainages, but they're going to start in earnest in May, next month, which will repair the pavement on approximately 15 miles of northbound and southbound State Route 29. So it's going to be between Trancas Street and Mee Lane, and this will be going on from May through the fall of this year. And there will be lane closures in the evenings, so they're asking for our patience so we can have good pavement between here and Napa. Okay, thank you.
Good. Just a couple.
I would just add to that I think it would be a good idea to have that flyer sent out
yes,
electronically to our citizens.
and I'll give you this, there's some links to websites that'll be giving updates on the project.
All right, just a couple of things. First of all, I was very much impressed by this publication of the mosquito abatement district. I think it came in the Register, and I would certainly urge everybody to take a look at the publication or brochure to make sure that each of us is using best practices to control mosquitoes. And secondly, I was also struck by Mr. Doherty's excellent piece on public information requests, and particularly our city clerk's comments to the effect that if she can get a proper software program in place, that might help alleviate the issue by making our records considerably more accessible to the public in the first instance, so that we can reduce the number of requests. And I just wondered where you were on that. When does that come to council? How quickly can we hopefully get this in place? Is this part of the next budget cycle?
So I'm finalizing the RFP right now, and then it'll be going out, and it'll be coming before council once we have collected all the RFPs.
And
I think the lead time would be we could have everything copied within about a month.
Oh, once the consultant's on board? Mm-hmm. Oh, that's very quick. And in terms of the RFP, what's the response time to the RFP?
I'm going to give it 30 days.
30 days. Okay. Well, good. That pleases me to see you're moving ahead rapidly on this issue.
You bet.
Thank you very much. Okay. That takes us to the consent calendar. That takes us to presentations and public recognitions. And the first item, and I've managed to bury my new, it's just the new one, but I think there was a modification. In any event, the 6.1 is going to be the swearing in of a new officer and a discussion of the K-9. So let's begin with that. Chief?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thanks for giving me the opportunity to come up in front of you and introduce you to some of our employees. We actually have a couple of swearing-ins to do and introduce you to our newest employee. And I want to start with the newest employee first and get them on their way. If Officer Coltrip could come up with Barrett. Barrett is our newest employee. He's a 15-month-old German Shepherd. He's been through the 5-week training, and both of them have been through the 5-week initial handler and canine training. Now they know how to talk to each other and how to understand each other, and we're happy to have both of them on the street now. And very quickly, as soon as they hit the street, they started doing what we would hope canine does, and searching for narcotics and searching for people, and just being a partner for Officer Coltrip when he's out there. In the first 3 weeks, he's had 4 deployments, including today, where we did a pretty extensive search of an area for a backyard prowler, and Barrett did his job, and we all stood back and watched him. So it's something for us to learn to remember that there's a dog coming up behind you and stand still. So we're all adjusting and learning. And if you see Barrett out on the street, he's very friendly, but ask Officer Coltrip first before you approach him, and he'll let you pet him. Barrett loves to get petted. I'm surprised he's not laying on his back right now. But he also has what I've been told is a very active switch. And when he doesn't know it's playtime, if he flips his switch on because he thinks you're being aggressive, we might have an issue. So always ask Officer Coltrip if you can say hi to the dog first, but then by all means, show Barrett how he's appreciated, and we're happy to have him here. So this is Barrett.
How's your Dutch?
What's that?
How's your Dutch?
My Dutch, yeah, I've learned some Dutch. Some German.
Okay, good.
We intend to have a demonstration at a future date. We're a little too busy tonight, I think, and we're not prepared for it at any rate, but that would hopefully be something we could do in the future for you.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Thank you very much. Yes. All right.
It's a great dog, but you go home with furry legs every day. Sheds like crazy. Okay, so now I would like to do a swearing in for a new dispatcher, one of our newest officers, as well as a promotional swearing in for our newest sergeant. So Sergeant Tharp, if you'll come up, and Stephanie Yin is our newest dispatcher, and Sandra Felix is one of our newest officers. They'll be coming up. Just a little bit about Sergeant Tharp's been here 16 years. He looked at me like he got it wrong. He's been here 16 years. He's done a lot of stuff for us. He's been a field training officer since before I got here, and that's been coming up on 11 years. He's worked the motors, worked traffic for us, riding the Harley. He's been a watch commander or OIC when the sergeants were not on duty or not available, he's recently been awarded the Medal of Courage for some of his actions during the fire at an award ceremony we had back in February. And so we're very pleased to promote Sergeant Tharp. He's actually promoted in March, so this is we drug our feet a little bit to get him in front of you, but we're doing that. Next to Justin is Stephanie Yin, and she's our newest dispatcher. Stephanie is a resident of Angwin. Although she's a transplant to Napa County, she's definitely fit in very quickly around here. We stole her from Calistoga PD, by the way. We like to do that, and we only pick the best, right, Phil? She also was a volunteer for the fire department in Angwin, and I think we've corrected that error. Okay. Stephanie is fluent in Spanish and obviously English, and that comes in extremely handy in our office and on the phone and dealing with the public that comes in person. So we're happy to have Stephanie here as well. And then next to her is Sandra. Sandra Felix is not our newest officer, but she's the newest one standing up here. You may not recognize her because she's been working a lot of graveyard since she got off of training. And we're hoping to correct that here in the near future and get her on some day shifts so she can get out on Main Street and say hi to folks. But she's been extremely busy on graveyard, one of our more busy officers. While she was still in field training, she also earned the Medal of Courage for her actions during the fire, during some of the evacuation events that went on. She's very active in her church, and she also is extremely fluent in Spanish, and we're pleased to have her on the street with us.
Excellent.
Cindy, so we'll just do the ceremony real quick.
If you guys could have gotten the center. If you can raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Justin Tharp,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will
that I will
bear true faith
bear true faith
and allegiance
and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will
and that I will
well and faithfully
well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Good.
We have some people here to pin badges on. If Justin's wife Rachel, and
I just want to apologize for the noisy little girl. We thought she'd do a little better.
Come on, Rachel.
Sandra's husband Renee is here. And then Stephanie said I'm her favorite chief, so I get to do it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was a wonderful ceremony. That takes us to our proclamations, and we have two. The first proclamation deals with human trafficking awareness. Is there anyone here to receive the proclamation? Please come forward. Oh my goodness, wonderful. Proclamation, Human Trafficking Awareness. Whereas human trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery in which victims are forced to work in various forms of labor exploitation, including but not limited to commercial sex acts and other services induced through force, fraud, or coercion, and whereas due to its isolating nature, many individuals across the globe are unaware that trafficking exists in their neighborhoods, and whereas it is estimated that more than 40 million men, women, and children around the world are victims of human trafficking or enslavement, reaping worldwide profits of over 150 billion, and whereas Soroptimist International of St. Helena and Soroptimist International of St. Helena Sunrise have declared raising awareness of human trafficking as a problem of their work by recognizing the week of April 23-27 as Human Trafficking Awareness Week in the city of St. Helena. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that I, Alan Galbraith, Mayor of the City of St. Helena, do hereby call upon the citizens of St. Helena to recognize the vital role that is played in ending all forms of slavery and to support Soroptimist International of St. Helena and Soroptimist International of St. Helena Sunrise as they raise awareness through education and other efforts to stop human trafficking, dated April 24th. Would any of you like to make a comment or two?
Thank you. My name is Pam Parker. I'm a resident here in St. Helena. I'm also the governor of Founder Region for Soroptimist International. We have 52 clubs in our region, which covers Northern California, Hawaii, Guam, Saipan, and Palau. And yes, I do have to go there sometimes. We have 12 clubs in District 3, which is one of 6 districts in our region. And the president of the Calistoga Club started this process with making our communities aware of human trafficking. And I got the idea to invite all of the other 11 clubs in District 3 to support the same effort. And I'm proud to say that all 12 clubs in District 3 are now doing this same process, having proclamations presented in their communities. And we will be having our annual conference next week where there will be about 400 women there representing all 52 clubs. I will invite the other 40 clubs to do the same in our Founder region. Thank you very much for your support. We appreciate it, and we thank you for all that you do for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next proclamation is Earth Day. Is there anyone to receive the Earth Day proclamation? I will read it, and then I will accept it on behalf of the city. Earth Day proclamation. Whereas plastic waste can be found everywhere, land or sea, even in the most remote places on the planet, affecting both humans and animals, and whereas humankind is currently facing tremendous global challenges, among them the need to manage an increased amount of waste to which plastics will contribute roughly 12,000 million metric tons by 2050, and whereas approximately only 10% of plastic waste is recycled, and whereas all people of this earth from all walks of life have a right to a healthy environment, and plastic pollution has been associated with several health issues affecting the general population, and whereas it is more important than ever to cooperate to find solutions for the plastic waste that is concentrating in several enormous patches in the ocean and that threaten the human food chain, and whereas it is essential to involve the community in the design and implementation of solutions for pressing environmental issues such as plastic pollution, and whereas Earth Day is an annual reminder of the constant need for environmental activism, stewardship commitments, and sustainability efforts, now therefore I, Alan Galbraith, Mayor of the City of St. Helena, have the distinct honor of proclaiming April 22, 2018 as Earth Day throughout St. Helena, and encourage all of its inhabitants, businesses, and institutions to use Earth Day to celebrate the earth and promote the well-being of the inhabitants of the city, town, and the protection of their environment. Signed by me. Of course, we've gotten beyond April 22, but nevertheless, it's important we keep this in mind every day, that we especially look after plastics. You know, I bicycle on the Silverado Trail all the time, and the plastic pollution along the trail is absolutely shocking. I just came back from New Zealand for a few days with my family there, and there was absolutely zero visible plastic pollution. We can do better. Thank you. Staff briefing, we have none. That takes us to the consent calendar. Does any member of the public wish to remove any item from the consent calendar, or any member of the council?
I have a couple quick questions on 8.5 and 8.8.
All right, and I have a quick question on 8.6. Let's just see where I can. So let's take the others, and then we'll go back to those if that's satisfactory. So at this point, the chair would entertain a motion to approve consent items 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.7, 8.9, 8.10.
And 11.
Oh, 8.11.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Ellsworth?
Yes.
Coberstein?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. So then that takes us back to 8.5, and I had a question there as well.
Okay.
But why don't you go first, Mr. Ellsworth?
Yeah, my thought was, it looks like we're on target with everything in terms of our revenues in the general fund and the wastewater and water enterprise funds. I'm just wondering when we get to these quarterly reports, if we can have a quick summary that's verbally made at a council meeting so that the community kind of knows that we're in good shape or bad shape, whatever shape we're in, but so quarterly we let people know and kind of where the reserves are, and just a quick overview of where we're at quarterly. So it was just a thought that if we're putting this out, if we can make a kind of a verbal statement to the community. Just a thought.
No, I think it's a good thought, and perhaps these reports should not go on the consent calendar. We'll just put them in the regular business cycle. My quick question related to the wastewater enterprise fund, because with respect to the others, it said with respect to revenues that we were on target, but it's not stating that with respect to the wastewater enterprise revenue, and I assume we're not on target for reasons that were previously explained, and that's why it's not there.
That is correct, and also wastewater revenues are, budget-wise, are technically on target, because during the mid-year budget review, we did decrease the projected revenues for it, so we actually are on target because of that decrease.
All right, because we made an adjustment reducing the revenues from what we anticipated when we implemented the rate increase.
Correct.
All right.
So, and I will add to the quarterly reports net position on it as well.
Okay, good. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to approve 8.5.
So moved.
Is there a question on 8.8?
We're going to go to 8.6 next, but let's deal with 8.5.
So moved.
Second.
So I had Ellsworth was the first and you're the second.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Ellsworth,
Yes.
Vice Mayor White,
Yes.
Councilmember Doring,
Yes.
Coberstein,
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith.
Yes. With respect to 8.6, my question was strictly relating to the not-for-profits. I, quite frankly, didn't quite understand where it says we're talking now about fiscal year 2018 applications. In other words, that would be from July 1st, 2017 to June 30, 2018. And there's a column that says percent grant funds expended. And there are a lot of 0%. There's 100%. But it's a timing issue there. But can you explain that, Ms. Mitz?
Actually, I will defer that over to our Administrative Services Manager, Mandy Kellogg, who oversees our grant program.
Terrific.
We just haven't received requests for reimbursement for those yet. So what you're seeing is the ones that are showing the percentages. Those are the only ones that have submitted requests for reimbursement at this point.
In other words, even though we, the council, appropriated the money a year ago, these not-for-profits haven't submitted a form that enables them to get the money?
That is correct.
Okay. I would certainly urge them to do so. We're coming up on the next budget cycle.
We have received some since that March 31st date that we are processing.
Okay, good.
I think we've only received 2 additional ones since that date.
All right. Well, that was my question. It just seemed a little odd to me that so many of the nonprofits had not asked to receive their money, if that's what it meant, and that's what it means. So.
Yeah, and another point of clarification for the nonprofits, the nonprofit is a reimbursable grant, so they actually have to spend the money prior to us actually paying them for it. So some of them might still be expending funds right now, and there is a deadline date in the in their application form stating how long that they have to ask for their reimbursement.
Right. So that's the explanation. Okay, very good. Appreciate that. So at this point, Chair would entertain a motion to receive and file 8.6.
Councilmember Coberstein has a question.
I just have a question. Since we pulled this, at the end under flood projects, it says the staff is working on completing the conservation easement. Once completed, the city will receive some funds. Is that easement going to get some review at the council level?
I will divert that to the Public Works Director.
I believe we've discussed that before, that was a possibility. I don't think we ever had anyone appointed to assist with that.
Is this the easement that goes across our...
Yes.
Which reportedly was going to prevent us from connecting to the Silverado Trail?
Not in current time.
No, but it was at one time reported that if we had to put this easement in place, we were going to lose all opportunity to connect to the Silverado Trail, which doesn't seem to be the current thinking, and I think it would be good to have a public discussion about what exactly this easement is, because there's some confusion.
The easement has to go through several review processes and will be brought to council before it moves forward. It has to be reviewed by the Department of Water Resources, as well as the Napa Land Trust and city attorney and myself, and anyone else that would like to be a part of that.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with Councilmember Coberstein. We don't want to get too far out in front if the council is not on board in terms of what the negotiations are. So if there's a negotiation point that seems to be very crucial and would affect our ability, for example, to get to Silverado Trail, we need to have that at the council for discussion before we go too far down the path and letting everybody know, oh, yes, we're on board. We may not be on board, so it's important.
The current discussions are there is no issue with that, with the current discussions with the WR. So I heard that was the case before, but that's not currently what's been in writing.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
All right. So at this point, the chair would entertain a motion to receive and file 8.6.
So moved.
Vice Mayor White,
Yes.
Councilmember Ellsworth,
Yes.
Oberstein?
Yes.
Doring?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. And then finally, 8.8. This relates to the downtown restrooms. Item 8.8, this relates to the downtown restrooms, and Mr. Ellsworth had a question.
Yeah, I just had a question. As this is under construction and if it's affecting parking, I'm wondering if we've had any further discussions on the PG&E lot as maybe a temporary solution if this is going to be impactful to downtown parking. I'm just wondering if there's any.
We're having active conversations with PG&E, and they've raised a new idea related to that would allow it to be used for parking, and we can continue. We can link the two because I think that's actually a good idea to help expedite the access to that parking area. I think there is a willingness on PG&E's part. The details are yet to come.
Great. Well, that's good to hear. Thanks.
Yeah, good.
Want to elaborate on what the timetable is actually for the construction?
I have Mr. Tobias Barr here to help answer any questions you have.
Good.
Public Works Project Manager.
So we're releasing the bid tomorrow if it's approved, and it'll be 30 days, and we'll collect the bids. And after we have a low bid awarded, after we give them the notice to proceed, we've allowed 45 days of construction, 45 working days of construction. We do have written into the specs, language that deals with cleaning up on weekends, making as much of that parking lot available as possible during construction. So we are trying to address it in the project specifications.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Will these be as high-tech as the New Zealand bathrooms just installed in Napa?
Self-cleaning?
Better.
Indeed, I use the New Zealand bathrooms in New Zealand. They're wonderful. They kick you out after 10 minutes, too.
Well,
not that I came close to 10 minutes.
Well, the plans are all available to view.
They
all
automatically
More information
unlock.
that we need to know.
And I'll point out we're using some local concrete products from Watershed Materials, and there's some other things that you can view in the staff report and on the plans. Obviously low flow water fixtures and all those things. So yeah, we're trying to practice what we preach in terms of water savings and everything.
Good, excellent.
Maybe we should have a grand opening.
That would be lovely. I would enjoy that.
All right.
Move approval of the staff recommendation.
Second.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Coberstein?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. Okay, that takes us to 9.1, which is the City of St. Helena 2018 Housing Element Update. And this is Mr. Hausch.
Thank you, Mayor Galbraith, members of the council and the public. I'll just wait while my PowerPoint comes up. As mentioned, this is the 2018 Housing Element Report. Just a little bit of background. All general law cities are required by April 1st to submit an annual report to Housing and Community Development detailing the progress towards their housing element implementation. And this report is required to detail the local efforts to remove governmental constraints to the maintenance, improvement, and development of housing. This report is year 3 in the current housing element cycle, which is 2015 to 2023. It's worth noting that our arena allocation, which is the number of housing units that are allocated to St. Helena, was significantly reduced in this cycle. The past cycle identified that St. Helena should construct 121 units from 2007 to 2014. This cycle for St. Helena and in statewide, most communities in general had a more realistic expectation, and this year's or this cycle's allocation was 31 units for St. Helena. There are some specific income qualifications or categories included in that. But our housing element generally is two parts. It's a housing needs assessment, which is kind of a data analysis of the current condition of the city's housing stock, and then the housing element itself. And our housing element is based on 6 goals, which are intended to facilitate housing development, listed here on the slide and also discussed in the staff report. And implementation of these goals is supported by a number of policies, implementing actions and quantified objectives. So there's a variety of policy direction provided, identifying how each of these goals are to be obtained or met through the housing element period. As identified in the staff report, the City Council has initiated several steps, and these steps are underway currently to implement some of the housing element goals. It's worth noting that 29 housing units have been approved so far in this cycle, and that's the 31 that's required. We haven't satisfied all of the income categories. However, that is significant improvement or progress given where we are in the cycle. We have pursued and been awarded a $500,000 home grant, and I am happy to say the first loan from that is a zero interest, zero payment loan. Those documents were submitted today, so that will be going out. I just need to get those signed and back to the Housing Authority next week, so just an update on that. I know some council interest. And then also funds from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund have been committed to support projects within the community, and I'll discuss that further later tonight and in this presentation. It's also worth pointing out that there are many more policy directives which are identified in the housing element, and the council goal of creating a housing strategy is a perfect opportunity to implement some of these goals. The City Council has initiated a process to have a white paper drafted. This is intended to analyze some of the challenges and help prioritize some of the efforts to fulfill the housing element, and staff sees this as a perfect opportunity to kind of kick off implementing the goal that the council has prioritized. However, there are some policies or elements of the housing element that may be identified as more challenging to implement, and those are discussed further in the staff report and obviously in the housing element itself. And so it's worth paying attention that there are some elements that will need some additional resources and efforts in order to achieve those very specific or those goals. Links to both of these documents are provided in the staff report, and the report has been submitted and accepted by HCD, so that is accomplished. And this presentation was made to the Planning Commission last week, so we're trying to let everyone know. It's important, staff thought, to take this opportunity, given that we're discussing housing, to just briefly go over some of the other elements regarding housing in the community that have been kind of taking place over the last year. Obviously, 2017 was a banner year for housing legislation. 15 new bills were signed into law, and they were designed to increase the supply of housing statewide. They made a number of changes to existing requirements and added many new requirements for the review and actions on housing projects made at the local level. A number of the specific bills are discussed in the report, and there's a summary of those bills from the League of Cities, and thank you, Vice Mayor White, for providing that to me. There's a lot of summaries of this information out there, but I thought that the League one was very concise and also provided a lot of information. Staff is considering putting an item on the Planning Commission agenda to kind of give a primer on how we anticipate these laws to come into effect. However, I think some of the implementing agencies at the state level are still trying to figure that out themselves. And so as we get a little bit more traction on that, I'll prioritize that with the City Attorney's Office, and we'll put together a presentation. One of the things that is very specific and worth noting in these new regulations are the reporting requirement changes. And so past reporting to HCD has been optional, and frankly, the city was lax in its presentation of those reports. You'll recall we presented years 2010 through 16 last year to the council. And staff is highlighting this because now grant funding is tied to filing those reports. And so if we are not current on those reports, we run the risk of losing grant funds. And so it is important that staff in my department make that a priority to keep that report up to date and make sure that it is accurate, and that will keep us in good standing with our grant receipts. So I just wanted to highlight that need, as that is something that we do need to prioritize to ensure ongoing funding. My apologies. A few other issues, just to give an update on Calderon. In 2014, the city entered into a settlement agreement committing to provide a certain number of affordable housing units or monies into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and these milestones are tied to specific timelines. To date, the city has approved or expects occupancy of 16 units to qualify for these requirements, meeting the 2018 milestone. However, an additional 9 affordable housing units of low income or lower are required by 2020 to satisfy the next milestone, and staff does not have any applications in the pipeline for those projects or those units. So just, again, worth highlighting, it's more than 2 years away, but
No, it's not.
staff has looked at trying to make sure that we meet those requirements, because the penalty for not meeting the unit count, those additional 9 units by 2020, December 31st of 2020, I believe, would be a payment of $750,000 from the general fund into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So that's a significant number. The 2020 milestone is the largest one in the settlement agreement, so staff wanted to prioritize raising that to the council, just to keep it in everyone's thoughts and minds as we're moving forward and looking at projects into the future. Obviously, Turley Flats and Brinkle Court are 2 very important projects associated with this, and these projects are some of the areas where the council has spent Affordable Housing Trust Fund money. Just to recap, Turley Flats was approved in 2013, but is now under construction and is actually on the agenda for the council to discuss at a later date. As of now, the city has loaned $700,000 of Affordable Housing Trust Fund monies to Turley Flats, including hard monies and fee subsidies. Similarly, the Brinkle Court project at 684 McCorkle, the city donated land to that project in 2016. Our town, St. Helena, has entitled a self-help townhouse project of 8 units, which was approved at low income, but they currently anticipate being able to provide 2 very low income units, and I've heard potentially a third, but they have identified 2 very low income units and 6 low income buyers to qualify for the loans required to purchase those units. They are awaiting final map recordation prior to pulling building permits, and occupancy is expected sometime in 2019 on that project. Finally, just to give an update on the balance of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the staff report identifies $400,000. We sharpened our pencils a little bit and looked at it. The most up-to-date balance of the trust fund after all committed funds is $430,000 as of tonight. So just so you have that summary. There's no direct fiscal impacts identified as a part of this analysis, other than the need to commit staff resources towards maintaining the reporting requirements, and then also the direct impacts of funding from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. But there are no general fund requirements or impacts associated with this other than staff time. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from council?
I just wanted to clarify. So it's by December of 2020 that 9 units have to be approved.
I believe so. I have the Calderon here. I could check for you, but I believe that's the case. And
Yeah, it's right here.
That is the case, and there is a question. I haven't given it the level of analysis that it will require, but there is a question as to whether the donation of the land to the Brinkle Court project, there's a provision in the Calderon Settlement Agreement that allows land donation to substitute for milestone payments. I haven't done that analysis to determine whether I believe that would satisfy that payment if the council does not approve the additional units by the end of 2020.
And I would just add to that, in order for you to approve them, they have to be submitted. So that's the issue, is getting a project in the pipeline.
Okay. Any other initial questions from council? Is there any public comment? We do have the Turley matter on our agenda at a later hour, not a later date, but our last item on the agenda, so that will be the subject of discussion later on. All right, seeing no public comment, entertain a motion to approve the staff recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
City Clerk?
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
I'm sorry. And Councilmember Ellsworth?
Yes.
Coverstein?
Yes.
Young?
I didn't hear. Did you say me? Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Mayor
I did not
Galbraith?
hear you. Sorry.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. Okay, that takes us to new business. 10.1, which is the not-profit grant applications. And, Ms. Kelly?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. This item is presenting the 2018-19 nonprofit grant requests. We received a total of 17 applications that were deemed eligible for consideration by the City Council for funding. The total amount of funding requested is $135,200 from the general fund and $10,000 from the affordable housing fund, for a total of $145,200. This first slide here shows a comparison of the nonprofit funding for the last 3 years with the current request amount. The next slide is going to show the list of all the organizations that are requesting funds, the grant request, and the name of their program. Sorry, it's a little small. During the fiscal year 18-19 budget preparation, we have maintained the nonprofit funding amounts at the levels of the current fiscal year, which is $100,600 from general fund and $10,000 from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Therefore, if you were to choose to fund all the requests, it would require an additional $34,600 from the general fund. Each of the requests that would be funded by the general fund could be reduced by 25% of the requested amount in order to maintain the current impact to the general fund, or alternatively, you could deny 3 to 4 of the requests. Do you have any questions?
All right. No initial questions. Before we open it up to public comment, I think maybe the way to proceed here, at least initially, is to see whether there are any of the applicants where any member of the council has concerns that perhaps the application should be denied. Because I'd like to take those first if there are any such applications. I certainly myself would like a discussion of the Kiwanis application and the Lincoln Theater application. I have concerns about both of those.
I just have a comment in reviewing the materials for the Stevenson Museum. This is a request for $6,500. $1,500 of that is city fees, building permit, and another permit. And we routinely waive those. And I think we could reduce the request and, with our other hand, waive those permit fees. I think they total, it's 23% of the entire cost of this project.
Well,
Your Honor, Mr. Mayor, I would just add, I've talked about this year to year, and I'm glad to see that in front of us there is an actual vision statement and a mission statement, because our resolution actually requires us to be informed about how each applicant will meet our city's goals and vision statement. And unfortunately, I think it's a deficiency in our application, because you'll note that not one of the applications actually speaks to that issue. I think that's our problem, not the applicants, for sure. But I think it's good for the discussion before we get into, well, I have a problem with this application or that application. I think it would be a good relevant discussion, and maybe you intend to do that, to really have a good look at our mission statement to see what kinds of things are being promoted in these applications. And for me, I think all of these are very worthy, but not all of them meet our mission statement. And maybe we have to work on our mission statement a little bit next year, because we keep getting, especially in the area of social services and education and scholarships. If you look at our mission statement, that really is not in there at all. Mm-hmm. Maybe it should be, because I'm a proponent of social services for sure, because I think that's something that the city or governments do when nobody else is doing it. So that's just a thought that I think it's important for us to put ourselves in a proactive mode rather than sort of an emotional reactive mode where we're comparing different organizations. I think we really want to force ourselves to become more objective in this process. So maybe this is not a deficiency that we can correct to its fullest this year, but certainly next year we have to have a better application with a question and have applicants answer how they are meeting the city's goals, not their goals, but our goals. So that, I just thought I'd add that to the mix.
I don't disagree with you at all. I think that is important. But we are where we are tonight, too. And so I guess the question I have is, with respect to these applications, are there any that members of the council have serious reservations about? I've identified 2 that I have serious reservations about, because my thought would be to deal with those first and then see where we are from a financial point of view. Does anybody object to that process?
What 2 did you mention?
I mentioned the Kiwanis Foundation and the Lincoln Theater.
I would say the farmers market would be one that I have a concern about.
All right.
I had a concern last year too, but we approved it.
All right. Any others that present an initial concern?
The other point I didn't make in my little recitation is that, we use the word programmatic, and maybe that, I don't know if that's an accounting term or if that's a nonprofit term. Programmatic is what we're supposed to be limited to, and not necessarily capital types of investments. And I noticed that on some of these, it's a mix of capital and services or programs. I guess essentially it can all be programs. I know that, for example, not to pick on one, but the clinical lay, those are capital items. That's equipment, and so our mission and our own resolution says that we don't fund capital improvement. So that would be only for that purpose, for the technical purpose. It's really not something, and there may be others where there's some capital or equipment or those kinds of expenditures. That would be a concern to me, and I don't know how we go through those one by one. So,
well, it's
and I do think that you're bringing up goes back to process that looking at how we move forward. Maybe what is our process and where can we help refine that so that we're moving forward all together.
All right. So my thought would be at least to start with the Kiwanis Foundation, then the Lincoln Theater. I think Ms. Koberstein made an excellent point with respect to the Robert Louis Stevenson Museum, and talk about the farmers market. And let's see where we are after we get through those. Does that make sense to everybody?
Can I ask, we have 2 scholarship programs. We have the Kiwanis Scholarship Program. We also have Preschool for All Ages is a scholarship program. Do you distinguish between one versus the other? There are 2 scholarship programs here. And I'm not saying I don't support them, but I'm just wondering why.
Well, it's a tough distinction, but to me, Rotary Club, Kiwanis are service organizations, and it seems a little odd to me for them to be, for Kiwanis, and I would say the same thing about Rotary, to be coming to the City Council for funds, given their role as service organizations, whereas Preschool for All is directly in the business of awarding scholarships. That's what it does. And so I do draw a distinction there, but like all distinctions, sometimes they're a bit blurry, and you can't always draw a perfect line. So let's...
That's what you did your whole career.
Thank you. Let's
As well as I.
So let's start with the Kiwanis Foundation. Is there anybody from the Kiwanis Foundation here? Okay, seeing nobody there, my inclination, and I want to see whether my colleagues would join me, is not to fund the Kiwanis Foundation.
I would agree with that. I think if we're going to fund scholarships, maybe that's a policy that the city council wants to look at in the future, but I don't see funding another group to actually fund scholarships and I see your distinction between the service group and a nonprofit that is really targeted at scholarships for preschool that otherwise wouldn't even exist. And I think there's a lot of service organizations in our town that do provide scholarships, and they provide that through their own fundraising and their membership.
All right. Is there a consensus that we don't want to fund the Kiwanis Foundation?
I'm not in the ballpark with the rest of you on this one. I believe they applied last year. They matched these funds with $6,000. I realize we're faced with more requests than we've had, and we're at a higher number, but I'm not in favor of changing the whole ballgame here tonight, but making reasonable adjustments where we can. And I hope we'd have, if we're going to decide in the future we're not going to fund any kind of scholarships, we'll have a new and better policy. But this is a relatively minor request in the scheme of things. I would like to fund it.
All right.
And I support that point of Councilmember Koberstein's that it's a kind of a policy issue, and to be making a decision here, particularly it's a reasonable amount that they're matching. Or more than matching, I just feel like that's a policy thing that as we look at process moving towards next year is maybe the time to get into it. That's sort of my feeling.
I don't see where we funded it last year on that list of nonprofit grant applications. They're not here.
Yeah, I didn't remember it either. We did not fund it last year.
Maybe I'm mistaken there.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Ms. Kellogg is advising we did not fund it last year. Mr. Doring?
What is the question? Whether I'm supportive of this?
So with respect to
I think I'm inclined to support your reasoning and not support it for that purpose.
Okay. So I think there are 3 votes to 2. And again, all of these organizations provide wonderful services. This is not saying anything other than that. With respect to the Lincoln Theater, my difficulty with the Lincoln Theater is that, to me, it shouldn't be looking to our city for support. It should be looking to a school foundation or something that's a little more directly involved with the schools, because that's the program they seek to enhance. That's the problem that I have with the Lincoln Theater one. It's also perhaps a little more detached from St. Helena than the others, although what they propose to do is certainly here in St. Helena. But again, these are fine distinctions. I'd like to hear from my colleagues as to how they feel on the Lincoln Theater.
I have reservations about this one for a couple of reasons. I know there are other groups right here in St. Helena who wanted to apply, at least one of whom told me they could not because part of what they did was serve people outside of the community. And here we have an entity outside of the community. I think the programming is nice, but they also have an extremely healthy balance sheet, and I view part of what we're doing here is to help bridge a gap for people. This is one I could pass on.
Okay.
Well, do you want to go?
No, go first. I'll let you go first.
Again, I'm going to to me, it doesn't matter where the entity is from. The programming is actually going to be here. And frankly, I think this one more closely matches our mission than some of the other ones. We're trying to, one of our missions is to expand our cultural opportunities. To me, art, music, those kinds of things, theater, that's what we should be promoting, and that's what we told ourselves that we were going to promote. So the fact that the Lincoln Theater is outside of our community, to me, is not really relevant. I see your point. If somebody is doing work outside of our community, then I would probably accept that. But I think we have a dearth. We have a really, we're lacking in cultural opportunities, frankly. And I think this would be great to actually bring the Lincoln Theater, knows what they're doing, they know how to do it, and I think $10,000 to support that would be very good for our community. And I would say that about a couple other ones. Let's see, where is it that we have that on there? Oh, expanding and improving recreational services and facilities and cultural opportunities. That's directly part of our mission statement. To me, that actually makes a better case than some of the other applications. So I would support it.
Okay. What?
Well, I think the Lincoln Theater provides quite a few benefits to the city of St. Helena. I mean, it is a venue that our children use for not only concerts but play performances that are not associated so much with the school, but outside of the school. And I think the programs that they're speaking of that they'd be using the $10,000 for are a direct benefit for our children in the community. But we have to cut some of these to be able to meet the, maybe we don't give them the whole 10,000, but I still think it's a worthy ask. So,
as do I, in that these programs will be coming to St. Helena, to the community here, and if we are discussing percentages, if we have to think about a little bit less or whatever, but I do think that there's significant value to the community. This isn't happening down in Yountville. They bring the programming here, so.
Okay. Well, I think, go ahead, please. These are tough calls.
If we're not trying to reduce the overall amount, I can support this. I certainly can support the arts and things. I thought part of our mission here was to see if we could cut this amount down a bit, but for a few $1,000s, it's probably not worth it.
Well, I think I'm persuaded by Mr. Doring that we should support it. That's a wonderful program. I just wish they would turn to the schools more for this than us, but there we are.
And I do also think it speaks again to the process. So for next year, we just get a little more focused how we do things, and I think it'll be smoother.
All right. With respect to RLS Museum, I think we're all in agreement that the city should just waive the fees, and that would reduce that amount. Is that a fair statement?
Can we vote tonight to reduce the fees?
I would think so, sure, to waive the fees. No, we can't? Oh, for goodness sakes. Okay, well, that one would have to come back specifically on that issue. St. Helena's Farmers Market, Mr. Doring, you raised a question about that.
I don't think it's appropriate to be giving city funds to support such an idea. I think it's a worthy cause, certainly. Folks are given basically a voucher. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to this, but it's, to me, I think somebody can go to Sunshine, they can go pretty much anywhere in the city and buy food. I don't know why we would pick one vendor over another one in our community to enable impoverish folks to use these cards to purchase vegetables. I know that someone can argue that they're fresher, more closely grown at home here. I don't know if that's true or not, but so I just don't think it's within our mission. I guess, frankly, that's what I keep coming back to. I made the same argument last year. Again, it's a worthy cause, probably very helpful. I just don't think it's something that we should be doing.
Okay. Ms. Coverstein?
But if somebody wants to persuade me otherwise, I know, Jeff, you may know more about the program because you're more involved in the farmers market. I don't know enough about it, and I'd like to hear you out.
I guess the point I'll make is that I think the farmers market is more than just a food market. I think it's a cultural center in the community that begins in May and goes until the fall, and it's a gathering place, and it's a place where the whole community comes together and information is exchanged. There's many more benefits than just purchasing something. So I sort of feel like if there's a way to encourage people of all different income levels to mix at that communal area, there's some value, some cultural value to it.
I see the value. I just don't see the cultural value. I certainly see the value.
Just speaking to our mission statement, the very bottom thing is strengthening partnerships with the private, nonprofit, and public sectors. I mean, this could be said of all of these applicants. And personally, I think that where we're headed is to just take a little money away from a couple people, and I think next year is the time to do it, to have a more robust policy in place about what we are looking for, than to take $3,000 from the Kiwanis and $6,400 from the farmers market.
For myself, I agree with Mr. Ellsworth's statement. In some ways, I also see it as preserving and embracing the historic small-town rural character of St. Helena. I mean, farmers market fits into that, and I feel strongly that it's important to induce our low-income residents, to the extent we can, to be part of the community, which the farmers market very much is during the months it operates. That's just my take on it.
I'd like to ask, is there anybody from the farmers market that could speak on this program? So I'd be interested to see how it was implemented, how robust it was, whether they had a use. They hadn't pulled any of the funds yet from last year, but I mean, I think it's a worthy program. But how did it work? So, did it work?
Is there time before the budget that we can ask those questions about how it worked?
Just as an aside, everyone that is on the list here was invited to participate tonight and notified of the meeting. It's possible to coordinate their presence at the budget workshop on May 9th. And certainly the feedback, this is one of the advantages of having this discussion now so that we can adjust, if necessary, the numbers for May 9th. But we're happy to reach out.
Bless you.
All right.
Okay.
I just want to go on record that I do support the farmers market in St. Helena. So it's not a farmers market issue for me. I hope people can see the nuance here. So.
All right. So what is the pleasure of the council? I think it's fair to say that no member of the council, so far as I can hear, has an issue with respect to the appropriateness of funding the other applicants. So that then requires us to face up to the issue as to whether we're willing to go $34,600, perhaps a little less, over last year in terms of budgeting the not-for-profits. There was a couple of years ago where we funded at 50%, as I recall it, and then was it Mr. Rudd Foundation stepped in and very generously came up with the balance, at least for most of the non-profits. That's not my preferred way to go, for sure. And these requests to me are modest, generally speaking, and in some cases very important to the not-for-profit to show community support so that they can leverage that in terms of applications to other potential grantors. They can point out that the city of St. Helena believes them to be worthy and is supporting them, and of course I think we all think these organizations are worthy. So my sense of it myself is to fund them with the exception of the Kiwanis Foundation at what they request, and then commit ourselves next year to a more rigorous process. And if we have to revise our mission statement, we'll put Mr. Doring in charge of that. And I absolutely agree, and I want to underscore my agreement with Mr. Doring that as we look at these applications, and we all learn from year to year too, that I do think a question should be asked about how each of these organizations fits into the city's mission, and that's on us, and we can cure that next year. That's where my head is at the moment.
It's fine. And then I think there should be another discussion when we get to the budget hearings.
Well, I would think at the budget hearings that
we got to find where the money's coming from. We got to find the money where it's coming from to be able to increase this this give to the nonprofits.
Maybe the manager could speak to that.
We'll be able to provide you options at the meeting on May 9th. And so we built it based on last year's number, knowing that we may need to adjust. And so we have a few ideas related to where you would plug in additional funding.
Okay.
I would just add that we need to be consistent with our reasoning and theories here. You've now talked me out of it, Mr. Mayor, in terms of the Kiwanis Club, because really you're basically saying that's an issue for next year. We didn't get our ducks in a row this year, and somehow that now they're going to be swept up into that being sort of a victim of our process, while others would not be. So if we're going to fund them, we're going to fund them all. Frankly, let's fund them all at what they're. And that would be consistent with your argument, in my view. That's not my choice, but that would be the best way to go. I would just add, though, that come budget time, I will be asking and looking and really seriously requesting of this council that we maintain a 30 to 35% reserve. And so that's going to be some serious prioritization when it comes budget time. I may not have enough sway on this council, but I think that is critically important for us. So be prepared.
So on that note, I move to approve the $145,200.
All right.
And,
whole thing.
And Mayor, if I may, it would be appropriate, I think, if there are a couple of council members that would be willing to work with staff to revisit the program, the application process, the program itself, between now and next January, that would be very helpful if the motion could include a reference to designating a couple of members.
Can we do that, Mr. Brown?
No, you can't. The Brown Act really does require you to agendize the actions that you take, and the formation of a city council working group or subcommittee would really be an extra action. But I think it would be fair to say that the manager has direction and can work to bring that forward.
And I would be happy to serve on that, even though it's not on our agenda right now and probably can't discuss it. But I would be happy to once it does come before us, I would be happy to put my name in the hat.
I was going to say you'd be a
Mark,
really good, if we could vote on it, you'd be a really good option.
Okay, shall I second your, can I make?
No. Oh, so second his motion, sure.
Yes.
Yeah, Ms. Woods, yes.
Without the addition.
Yes.
All right. Did you get that down?
So there are some people that would like to speak, though. Aaron?
Yeah, we can open it up for public comment, but at the moment, we're undertaking to
Approve it.
approve everything. And,
think we should-
you know, you don't want to talk yourself out of something that we're approving. I apparently talked myself out of my position, so
No. I
setting a poor
just wanna
precedent.
say on behalf of all the nonprofits, thank you. And just kind of how these things bubble up and maybe just looking at the trending to see why the numbers go up too. It's kind of one of those things, as nonprofits, I mean, people are working really hard to secure funding. And as you know, and we all know, they're all great things. So if we hear of an opportunity, people would feel remiss to not apply for it. But we also appreciate getting it once. And, I mean, people really do understand that change has happened. So, I mean, I appreciate what you've done for all of these nonprofits. And I know that everybody here, whether they're here tonight or not, appreciates what the city has done. And we understand that things change and budgets change. But thank you for the commitment to serving the nonprofits in the community.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one other observation which worries me very much, and that is that given the changes in federal tax law, I actually think not-for-profits are going to have a more difficult time raising money from the private community, and that's certainly going to put more pressure on the cities to, not just our city, cities generally, to fund and try to make financial space for worthy not-for-profits. And obviously, we have a wonderful plethora of worthy not-for-profits here in the city of St. Helena, but it really worries me, these changes in federal tax law, quite frankly.
We used the words plethora and dearth in the same meeting. That's pretty good. I would just add one more thing, and then we can close this out. As we move forward, frankly, I think the Rionda House is underfunded by our city, and I think that the Upper Valley Family Center is underfunded by our city. And so at some point, I would encourage our council to look at those limitations on certain basic social services for our underprivileged families and our citizens and our seniors. To me, that is, I would say the word shameful that we only give $10,000 to those very worthy organization that for some people it's a matter of life and death.
I agree.
Here, here.
And one last thing I'll say is that as we try to move forward next year in clarifying our process, is having community input and involvement in that is helpful so that we all do it together. So please participate. Thank you.
Can I get one point of clarification? I know the issue with the Helena Foundation about the waiving of the fees. I know we can't waive the fees at this meeting, but do you want us to take the fee portion, city fee portion, away from the amount that we're granting them?
Why not?
That would be
We
up for
say
discussion at the next
$1,500.
meeting, and I think you can have a sense as to where that's going. All right, I think we have a motion and a second on the table.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Ellsworth?
Yes.
Coberstein?
Yes.
Doreen?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes, and I want to thank everybody who's come this evening to
Thank
deal
you.
with this problem with us. All right, that takes us to the after-action report on the Napa Fire Complex, and Chief Bowden, again, wonderful.
I have to run my own clicker. We really need taller microphones. For a seat. Yeah, seat. Yeah. Cindy, which way forward? The right one?
Looks like we'd be giving more money to.
Did you turn it off?
Ask Jesse.
I don't know.
Jesse, how's the Warriors doing?
Oh,
Okay, I think my slides are up now.
Seem to attract a lot of kids.
So I just wanted to take a few minutes to discuss the after-action review that was presented in the packet. Obviously, everybody knows we had a fire in October. Shortly after the fire was, shortly after the incident, had calmed down and things had started to get back to normal, City Manager Prestwich asked me to conduct an after-action review of the city's response to the Napa County Fire Complex. And so I began that, and what you see before you is a result of that review. So I'm just going to hit a few highlights. I don't want to belabor the whole thing, but I do think there are some key things that are important to talk about. Just as a review, on October 8th around 9:30 p.m., fires were reported in the South Napa County area around Atlas Peak Road, and then very shortly thereafter in the Tubbs Lane area around Calistoga. And pushed by 70-mile-an-hour winds, they eventually grew to about 145,000 acres, consumed 7,600 structures, and caused the deaths of at least 44 people, and spread into significant portions of Sonoma County as well as Napa County. While there was no the impacts to the city, while there was no direct fire damage to St. Helena, we were without power for 48 hours, approximately. We were blanketed in smoke for 8 days. We were under constant threat of a wind shift, which would have pushed the flames towards the city, or could potentially push them towards the city. We had numerous employees that couldn't get to work. They couldn't get out of their own, or couldn't get from their towns to our town. They were evacuated from their own homes. We had one employee who did lose their home to the fires. Internet and cellular service was down completely in town. City Hall, the fire department, and the police department were operating on emergency generators. And with the loss of power, the city's water pumping system was in danger of going down. It did not have a backup generator. The city's response, of course, the fire department was all over the county and doing heroic work. The police department was helping evacuate the Tubbs fire and the Atlas Peak fire, and then again up on Mount Veeder. The Public Works Department, the night that the fires broke out and the power went out, their on-call people came out and put out traffic control devices at our intersections that had no lights and no traffic lights. That was key. They got the pumping station going with backup generators that we borrowed, requested from the state, got them there in kind of under emergency circumstances and got them running. They had an employee sleeping at the water treatment plant just in case. I don't know how many days he slept there, but it was a lot. They got him a cot, and he stayed there. They got the emergency generators at the fire department, and the police department kept them running, which kept City Hall and the fire department and the police department up and running. City Hall turned into an information center and a ad hoc charging station for people to come in and charge their phones or whatever other cellular devices. They ran on partial staffing because, again, employees couldn't get in. The library became a de facto community center, a gathering spot, communication hub to the outside world once power did come back up. And although they didn't have any power for the first 48 hours, the library stayed open. They opened their doors with no power and operated manually. Thank goodness for the employees that could remember how to do that. And they checked out books with no electricity. The city's communications. I think I got ahead of myself a little there. Nope. The city's communications efforts, we put out frequent nixles, and our nixle subscription service went from 3,700 to a little over 11,000 followers very quickly as the fires continued. In the first 8 days, the city put out 10 press releases. They continuously sent out emails through the city listserv, which has a little over 2,200 subscribers, and our social media platform through the police department grew up to about 1,400 followers. The website had updates 2 times a day, and additionally, the city built a resource web page with links to several other resources throughout, sources for information throughout the county. Post-incident operations, really it boils down to the fire department, even though they weren't quite done up here, actually sent a crew down to Ventura County. As you might remember, there was another historically large fire in Ventura County immediately after ours, and they responded to that. So after the city manager asked me to conduct this after-action review, I conducted a post-incident assessment. One of the things that was beneficial to that was that the city council held a special council meeting, combined community meeting, which was a facilitated meeting on November 17th. And in that meeting, the public was able to talk about the things that they thought went well and concerns that they had for things that didn't go so well with the fire department, the police department, and really the response to the city. I was able to take notes from that and incorporate them. I conducted an internal incident response survey. That was a 4-question survey that went out to city staff, and based on that survey, I was then able to follow up with city staff for one-on-one interviews and group interviews to expand on those answers and actually ask a few other additional questions. I also had an opportunity to talk to the St. Helena Unified School District, who was not able to attend the November meeting, and they had some input to offer from their perspective, which was helpful. All that information that I gathered was used to inform this after-action report and determine what course we needed to take going forward and determine areas where we think the city was lacking in our response. So some findings and recommendations. It's important to talk about the things that we did well. We can learn from those as well, because sometimes it was done intentionally, sometimes it was done accidentally, and it's important to remember those and memorialize them so that next time they're all done on purpose. But just for example, life safety response. We had 0 casualties in civilian or safety casualties among residents and staff, and we had 0 safety injuries. The fire department and police department, the things that they were doing came back with no injuries. The succession planning and training was extremely fruitful. The fire department, when the chief was out in the forward area of operations, the fire department operated seamlessly. There was still a continuity of command. The Public Works Department and the library staff had several employees making important decisions in the absence of their supervisor or their director, and decisions that affected the quality of life in the town during this incident. And so the succession planning and training there was fabulous. The police department was able to assist with the evacuations at Tubbs and Atlas Peak, like I said, and Mount Veeder. We were also able to go up to Calistoga and help them with their evacuation. And as I said, the public works crew quickly and effectively maintained secure and safe water by getting those generators in to get the pump stations up and running. Without electricity, the pump stations don't work, and without the pump stations, there's no water for the fire department if they need to put out fires in town or even drinking water. Communication, that was kind of a mixed bag, but I'll go over the areas of success first for communications. I think timely and accurate public notification through social media. Nixle, local radio, was appreciated. City Hall and the library remained open through this entire event and provided information to the public. And as I said, charging stations when the electricity was back up and they were capable. Organization. The city established a presence in the EOC down at the Emergency Operations Center down at the county fairly quickly. And I think the staff overcame numerous obstacles to maintain function and order at the City Hall and throughout the city. And as I said, again, succession planning through the organization proved critical when management cannot be present. There were some mandatory timelines that involved city government, and all of our timelines were met. Resources. The community support was phenomenal. I mean, if anybody that stopped by the fire department saw that resource, that was unbelievable. Fed everybody that stopped in for 10 or 12 days straight, 3 meals a day. The institutional knowledge in town, people that live in town that remembered this happening in 1964, which I know is going back a ways. I wasn't born. But they remembered the fire that came through in 64 and knew that it was doing the exact same thing in 2017, and were able to tell us and inform the fire department these are the things that happened and that happened again. And so that was helpful for the fire department to, and it was helpful for the public to know, kind of as we disseminated that information, that this is what it did before and probably going to do again. Again, I said City Hall stayed open. We had people sleeping in City Hall in case they needed to answer phones or whatever in the middle of the night. The fire department operated 24/7 for 10 straight days. This is not a professional fire department yet, and that's not something they're used to doing. But they put in, if you do the math, that's 240 straight hours manning that fire department and responding on 12-hour shifts to that fire. We also had 140 ambulances on standby, and I'm not sure that the public knew that, but they were on standby, prepared to help us evacuate should we have to evacuate St. Helena. And again, the County Emergency Operations Center was responsive to our needs. We asked for help. We got help. Those generators, I think we asked for 1 and got 2, or we asked for 2 and no?
We asked for 2, didn't we?
We asked for 2.
2.
All right, I gave them too much credit.
Okay.
But they were helpful. Areas for improvement, and this is where we really can learn what we can do next time. And again, if you can't take a critical look at what you did and what you maybe didn't do, then there's some problems there. And so we like to take a look at what we didn't do. For communication, we have a reliance on digital media, and that resulted in limited pathways to get information out when the power went out. And no internet, no electricity, no cell phones really put a crimp on our ability to communicate. The loss of electricity and cellular service was out in town for 48 hours, and that just we have a few satellite phones amongst some of the staff, but not many. Our briefings, when we had them, were typically ad hoc and unscheduled. Some of you attended them. Some of you didn't, and it was just because you were there when it happened and not really a scheduled briefing. Messaging was not unified throughout the city, and I don't mean the residents, I mean even within the city staff. Some staff were not getting the full message. Staff that were intended to be up front giving out information felt like they weren't getting the latest information. The community had a limited means of receiving information from the city. There was no pre-identified community information points to send people to for information. We did eventually put a sign out in front of City Hall, and that was a start, but we need to establish some locations where residents know if something happens, here's where I can go for information. There were no pre-established phone tree or call-out procedures for city staff. That caused some serious delays in tracking down some of our displaced employees. Within the organization, city employees need a better understanding of what their role is as an emergency response or emergency responder to operate within emergencies for the city. We had some employees that didn't realize that they were emergency employees and needed to and had different roles. Officials and executives need a process to ensure timely and accurate information dissemination within the community. The city needs a process in place to create effective means of workflow during significant interruption of power and communication. We need a plan in place to provide minimal necessary supplies to employees who cannot leave for extended period of time. The employee sleeping on a cot at the wastewater treatment plant, I don't even know where they scrounged that cot up. I think we borrowed it. But we need, at minimum, some supplies on hand. Regularly scheduled EOC training for the staff and exercises. We've had some tabletops, but we need some exercises as well. And then backup procedures, checklists, cross-training need to be developed in key areas of City Hall. We had in finance one person who thankfully knew everybody's job because at one point or another she'd done that job, we would have had some problems in finance, I think. And it was just because the rest of the finance employees couldn't get in every day. In our resources, I talked a little bit about it, but our facilities that were designed for sustained use had not been tested, and that caused some issues. Failures occurred in equipment, supply chains. Even our fire department had some issues with some of their plumbing. It wasn't meant to be used 24/7 for 10 days. Community gathering spots didn't have backup power. The library has no generator, no emergency generator. We learned that there is a willingness in the community to participate in CERT training, community emergency response training, and so we need to look into conducting CERT training. We have no emergency volunteer center, so the people in the community that wanted to volunteer didn't have any place to go other than City Hall, where we weren't very well staffed and there weren't too many of us to talk to. And then interagency coordination. We didn't have an established city presence at the monthly county emergency operations center operational area meetings. Our attendance was sporadic. That's been changed, but our attendance at that point was sporadic, and we were not invited to the initial county EOC operations. But as I said, we eventually did establish that liaison. There was no communication between state law enforcement and local law enforcement prior to state law enforcement conducting some operations within the city limits. And I think that was probably an anomaly because we have a good relationship with the Highway Patrol. I think there was just a miscommunication on what they needed to do and what our involvement with that action was. And we need to consider inviting the Angwin and Deer Park fire departments to attend briefings held by the city fire department or senior staff during incidents such as this that affect an area larger than the city. They had no presence at our briefings, ad hoc or otherwise. Oh, there it is. So, needs assessment. And this list, I'll just tell you that as we go through it, the city does intend to address all of these, with the exception of the mobile programmable messaging boards in this 18-19 budget that we're going to talk about in May. The mobile programmable messaging boards, I think the intention there is to try to find matching grants and then create matching funds for those grants because they're quite expensive. However, this is a list of the things that coming out of the meetings that we held and the interviews that I conducted. Emergency supplies for 3 days. That's food and water. We didn't have anything on hand for the city staff that may have been stuck here. If we have an emergency where you can't get out of town and you're stuck in town for 3 days, no water on hand and maybe whatever snacks the employees brought with them. So 3 days worth. Charging stations. There are solar-powered charging stations that can be put out, mobile stations that can be put out for charging the digital electronics that everybody seems to have nowadays. Additional satellite phones. I said we have 4 in the staff. I believe the Public Works Director, I have one, the Fire Chief, and the City Manager have satellite phones. We need additional satellite phones to overcome incidences where all the county's cell towers are burned down. A plotter. We did not have the ability to create maps. We had to rely on the the state's fire maps. Sometimes we got them timely, but they came out at 7 a.m. and by the next day the fire shifted so much that even by the evening the maps were outdated. And there's plenty of other uses for that within the city. This is not just an emergency plotter. That's outside of my purview, so I won't expand on that. But we do need additional generators. The library needs a generator for sure. As I said, it was a community gathering point, and they operated without electricity, but it was still warm in October, and so they were sweltering in there, and it was filling up with smoke. And portable generators as well for things like the pump station and other issues in town that didn't have electricity and needed it. Fuel station, the Public Works Department does not have a fuel station. So when the power went out and the gas stations went down, the police department and the fire department were the only fuel in town, and the fire department's all on diesel. and the police department has 250 gallons, which is approximately 10 vehicles. So if the power's out and the fuel's out for several days, we don't have enough fuel. Public Works was driving to Napa to fill their trucks up during this incident because they were running out of fuel. Again, the mobile programmable messaging boards, that's something that we can use for emergency information points. They come with radar. They come with a lot of different capabilities. We can use them for a lot of different things in town, not just messaging, mobile messaging boards during incidents, but there's a lot of applications for them. And then a public warning system. We're still actually researching this, but there are several different opportunities out there for public warning systems for putting out information to residents when we have electricity and when we don't. And so Nixle was great when the internet was up and when people could get it. But when it's down, you have to have something else. So, and with that, I believe that's the end of my presentation. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has them. The fire chief is also sitting in the back. If anybody has any questions, I told him I'd throw him under the bus.
Okay. Well, just an observation here, which is that you're correct, the county did not invite us right away to the EOC, but that did get corrected very early on through the effort of our city manager, and Mr. Pixley, I think, spent quite a few hours down at the EOC as part of the operations team, and certainly I was there every day as part of the briefings and catching up on where the fire was and coming back and reporting to the city manager.
Yeah, I think at one point we had the Public Works, the Recreation Director was down there for several days, and then at one point we had an officer spend a couple of nights there for the night shift.
Yeah, and the whole effort there was as you stated in the report, was not to have mixed messaging in what is a small county, to hopefully have everybody on the same page. The only difficulty that I saw was that sometimes, as you noted, things moved very rapidly, and there was at least one occasion where by the time I got up here, the information that I had just gone over with the county fire chief perhaps an hour and a half earlier was out of date, and was really kind of shocking to me. But that fire, that was the Nuns fire, and that was a very difficult situation there at what I thought was the end after the county had said it was over, and it wasn't over for us.
Does the plotter, the map making tool, that is something that's looked at for this coming budget?
Again,
what we've done is we've included estimated costs for all of the items and included them in the draft. But some of these, for example, the programmable message boards, these are items that we can, in the event of emergency, we can ask for those through mutual aid and often receive that. In the case of those message boards, there is a grant opportunity, and so we've applied for 3. There is a matching fund requirement, which we'll talk about more on May 9th, but I believe the number is in the neighborhood of about $100,000 as a matching cost. So they're very expensive, but again, they have multiple applications.
And one other thing I'll mention that I thought was critical was, and it speaks, I think, to the professionalism of the staff, is that this town remained calm during this incident, and the leadership of the staff, of the emergency responders, of staying focused and calm, allowed the city to remain calm. And so whatever struggles we've identified that we've got to do better with, that element was critical to us, getting through this as a community. So that part of it, it's whatever, intangible, whatever, but that focus was remarkable. So, thank you.
Any other comments? Is there any public comment?
Thank you.
Does the fire chief or Mr. Pixley have anything to add? No? City manager?
I don't have prepared remarks related to this, but I owe the staff and the community a great debt of gratitude for all the work they put in during this event. I mean, they put up with extended hours, difficult working conditions. The smoke was very, very difficult to work with. The smoke was inside the buildings as well, and the community was wonderful. And so we have a lot of lessons learned out of this, clearly, and some great opportunities and ideas moving forward with the public's help. I think just in terms of reflecting on the event and the size of our community, one thing that comes to mind is that in a very small city like this, and the way that these disaster response systems are designed, when the event becomes so great it's beyond the capacity of the city to deal with the issue, then we ask for help. And our immediate ask would be to the county. And so if there's anything beyond a localized, meaning within our city limits, that tests our capacity, we're generally going to want to call the county for help. And as you know, in this county, we've had a number of events that climb even higher. And in this case, this was an event that had the president's approval of a federally declared disaster by Monday. So literally hours after this incident occurred, the county had asked for help, the state had offered help and declared a disaster, and the president had declared a disaster by midday Monday. We agendized the item knowing that we were in good shape, and we held a special meeting on that Wednesday just to formally declare the presence and existence of a danger and an emergency threat. But knowing whatever the event is, whether it's flooding, earthquake, fire, or something else, we're generally going to be, our emergency plan in many cases will be asking for help to the county and beyond. And at the county level, I know the county's had a lot of good conversations with the various agencies, and they're working on their after incident report. And I have a draft of a partner agency document that includes a number of recommendations that look similar to what you heard tonight. And so when that becomes formally available, we'll make sure that we share that with you as well.
Yeah. Is there any, let me open it up to public comment. Sure.
My name is Bobby Monana, speaking as a citizen. I had to leave early because I had asthma, and the smoke was so bad I had a place to go. I know that there's some kind of objective measure before an evacuation is called. I was just wondering if the Public Health Department has any kind of a similar process to alert seniors, maybe children and other people who have respiratory issues when it's important to evacuate for that issue, as opposed to simply having an evacuation because of the flames. Or does that happen anywhere? I'm just wondering if it happens anywhere, and if so, would that be something that, there are a lot of seniors in this town and a lot of people who might need at least some kind of an emergency, like if it were on I guess the phones weren't working, but whatever emergency communication would be set up to be told that it would probably be a good idea to leave because of the smoke as opposed to only the flames. I mean, I'm not sure if that's happening, and I'm wondering about it. I don't know if that's something that could be looked into.
No, thank you. It's a good question, and I'm straining my memory here, but I do think we had smoke warnings during that period. But I don't remember the role, quite frankly, of the county health department as I just sit here at the moment.
You're correct, Mayor. Later during the event, when the smoke became more of an issue, we went to the Bay Area Air Quality Management District and used some of their data and incorporated that into our messaging to make sure people are aware of the conditions. Generally, with large events like this, we have an emergency operations center at a macro level that's managing the incident. And so in this case, our county was central to that planning, and we had a liaison to that EOC. In this case, we also had the state of California managing parts of this response and making the very big decisions. And so in some ways, the state was involved in a lot of the decision making related to
assets were deployed and decision and evacuations were called. A lot of that was happening at the state level. And then at the local level, meaning via the county EOC, decisions were being made in a planning section and an operations section and other ways that we organize during a disaster. But smoke is power. I thought power, frankly, was going to be one of our challenges. It was a bit of our disaster, was power for a while. But smoke is a similar situation where when we bring those items to, and obviously I think everyone in the county was experiencing the challenges with smoke, and so the EOC through messaging and other means would be the right vehicle for documenting the threat, sharing that concern with residents, encouraging people to wear a certain type of mask, etc. So you see those types of communication efforts being made through a centralized planning effort during the emergency, and in our case, it was the county's EOC.
And I know that the county education, the school districts had, I think they actually got it from the Bay Area Air Quality Board, but different charts that they use to make decisions about closing the schools down because of the smoke. And that went out to all the schools, even the private schools. So that was pretty much the basis for closing down most of the county schools.
All right. Any further public comment? Let me close public comment. Any further comments from council?
Thanks. I guess the one thing that occurred to me is I still don't have a really good handle about my role as a city council member in an emergency like this. I mean, I relied on my intuition to be here, but I'm not sure what the expectations of staff are. I would have liked to take the survey or something to give some input there. I think we all probably intuitively felt, okay, we need to stick around and do what we need to do, but I'm not exactly sure what our role is. And I think it's important for us to know that, and so that we can fulfill the expectations of the community and the staff. So I just made that comment.
Good comment.
I just have one comment. I think it was a very good thing to call the community meeting or special council meeting as soon as you did after the disaster. If you were to ask people today some of the questions, what did you need, what were the problems, they wouldn't remember, but it was so fresh in everybody's mind that I think there were a lot of good suggestions made that evening, several of which I see in the report. Principally, that I think it is a good idea to have the generator in the library, have a generator at the city hall, but more importantly for people to know that there are 2 or 3 places in town that are designated where they can go and should go if they need information, maybe the Up Valley Center. But I thought that was excellent that it was done so quickly afterwards.
Any further? No. Chief and Bowden, that was a very well done report, and we all appreciate it. And we all understand the importance of saying what we did well and also where there's room for improvement. We all learn from these experiences. And I know from talking with the county and the city of Napa and the disasters they've gone through in recent years, they perhaps are a little bit ahead of the curve from us, but I thought on the whole our performance was quite good. Thank you very much. Okay. That takes us to SHAPE and a report on SHAPE, and I see Mr. Smithers is here.
Mark Smithers, Chairman of the SHAPE Committee. Hello all. So I'm going to give you a status report as requested, and I'll end it by making a request. So the SHAPE Committee was, we got to work starting in early November. I want to thank the council liaisons, Paul and Mary, and also there's been a lot of city staff that we've leaned on and have helped us as well. So I want to really thank and acknowledge them. And then we have 11 committee members, Anna Toe, and Doug Barr, Oliver Caldwell, Pat Dell, Glenn Smith, Joshua Park, Tim Neiman, Stan Knight, Jeff Feeney, Suzanne Selvestrin, and myself. And we have done, I think, a yeoman's job. We've met almost every week for 6 months now, and we probably have another month to go. But it's been a big commitment and a big investment by all those people. Just about every meeting, everybody makes it, so it's not like you got a bunch of people not showing up for a week or two. And I know it's impacted people's ability to travel, including mine. You can't go away for more than a week, so it's been really, people have really stepped up. So we've invested a lot of time. Just to, I guess, to review, I mean, the general purpose of the SHAPE Committee is to identify alternatives to address deficiencies and opportunities identified in the facilities condition needs assessment and the feasibility of concepts in the 2009 visioning statement, as well as financial strategies to address the identified deficiencies, opportunities, and the utilization of community assets. So that was our general purpose and mission. It lifted almost, verbatim out of the resolution. So sort of to generalize or categorize what we have been doing and the process, we initially started with, information gathering, sort of so we could lay a baseline there. We toured city assets. We reviewed and had a presentation on the municipal health diagnostic, and then we reviewed the condition needs assessment prepared by EMG. And actually, as part of that, we questioned a lot of the repair and replacement costs, and they updated those to something that we feel is more realistic, given the Napa County and St. Helena. We've also reviewed long-range forecasts. We actually initially had a presentation on the 2015 long-range financial forecast, which was the last one that was prepared, until Mark and April updated one, and the latest edition, then the final one is March 27th, 2018 edition. So that's the one we're working off of that we'll use for a lot of our financial considerations. We also discussed with Cosmont companies strategies related to financing, repairs, improvements, possible new facilities, and that sort of thing. So we gathered a whole lot of information in that. And then we went off onto the analysis and sort of developed alternatives and that sort of thing. We developed a set of criteria and principles sort of to support and guide us in reviewing those ideas we came up with. Some of that was supported by, we'd listen to, the public input from the focus groups and the workshops, and also reviewing back the 2009 visioning statement for Adams Street. We were able to get a lot of input, too, as to what was valued, what was important to folks, and what things to avoid as well. We reviewed space requirements that were provided to us by EMG for the needs on the basic programming and services. And then we had very open discussion and I guess idea setting. If you've ever watched any of our meetings, they can go on, but I think it's good to really air what people's thoughts and ideas are, and get everybody try not to cut people off, and as well as the public and the committee members. I think it's important for people to feel that they don't have a time limit on proposing their ideas and what the reasonings for it. We, have a lot of different ideas. It was I have to congratulate Paul and Mary on the committee that sort of came together and the council approved, because it is a very diverse group. So it's been actually really enjoyable to hear very different viewpoints on specific properties that you thought would be very simple to sort of make a suggestion and a proposal to city council on, and even the simplest ones sometimes have 5 alternatives. So it's been good. The public's been engaged. That obviously was critical because at the end of the day, this is all about the community and the people, and not even what you guys want. It's really what the community wants and the people that live here. So they have done the community got involved in public tours. There's been a couple workshops. We put together a short 30-second video that played at the Cameo to help raise awareness, and there's been a couple rounds of focus groups, which, as Mark mentioned earlier, finished this weekend, with a lot more participation the second time around. The first set of focus groups, I think we had maybe 30 people. Second time around, we got upwards of 70, so we got a lot of input that way. So where are we? The current status is we're getting close. The committee's nearing completion of their options and the recommendations. There's a working group of 3 folks out of the committee that are already starting to prepare the report because there's a lot of background information and process information that they can put into the report. And so they're already developing that and writing it up. We're getting close to identifying final recommendations, and we'll be tackling the core issues. Mark mentioned it earlier, the buildings we're going to ambitiously try to get through tomorrow night. And depending on if everybody can stay up late, we might just make it through it. But then again, there is a lot of difference of opinion out there, so we'll see how that goes. And then over the next few weeks, we'll have to consider all that and try and put it together in various packages, and along with the financial requirements and the alternatives and suggested options for those financial alternatives, because obviously at the end of the day we sort of have to pay for it all. And we are, one area that we keep hearing loud and clear from the community is they don't want this to drag on for another 10 or 15 years. And part of what, some of the folks that have mentioned, we've owned Adams Street for 18 years, and they don't want to wait another 10 or 15 years for Adams Street to become something that the community can rally around. So that is going to be something, well, hopefully that, when we bring it to the City Council, you guys will look at it as a package, and really you have to go after it and try and get it done, sooner rather than later. And we'll obviously have to provide financing options to do that. So why am I here besides just giving you a status report? We'd like you guys to approve giving us, another 4 weeks to 30 days or so, and wrap this up probably sometime, near the last week of May, and then finish up our reporting, and then likely maybe come June 12th and present our findings to you guys. So that's where we're at.
Okay, good. Is there any public comment? Seeing none. Any council discussion? I'm certainly agreeable to the schedule recommended by.
Questions, or else I'll just.
Oh, you can sit down. You can.
Okay.
Take your seat. Certainly, I'm amenable to the schedule you suggest. It seems practical. I don't think I have anything further to say.
No. Move to approve.
We move to approve.
Extension.
We move to approve the extension. So that's the staff direction to the staff and to you. Okay. Thanks very much, Mr. Smithers.
Thank you. And thank everybody on the committee for that dedication every week. It's remarkable.
You need an actual formal motion?
I made one.
Okay, we have a first.
You
Who's the second?
I'll second.
All right. Roll call.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Ellsworth?
Yes.
Coverstein?
Yes.
Doran?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. Okay, that then takes us to item 10.4.
Thank you, Mark.
And that's the city manager, and that's dealing with the corporate yard. Oh.
Hi.
Sorry about that. I was looking in the wrong direction.
That's okay. To follow up on the SHAPE Committee and the Facility Conditions Assessment, we received our first report in January of this year from EMG, and one of the most alarming things was the sad shape of the Public Works Corporation yard. The report identified various deficiencies, including mold concerns, moisture stains, and water damage from extensive roof leaks, floor tile that were missing, and more. The assessment estimated $171,000 of repairs that need to be made. I went down there myself on January 18th, and it was not heavily raining, but there was 7 or 8 different buckets placed throughout the building, and they weren't even catching all the water. And these are guys that are in and out of that building all day working, and there are ceiling tiles that had fallen and nearly missed several personnel over different times of the year. And in the short amount of time, they got a visqueen tarp put over the top. Mark directed me to start getting quotes, and there's a lot of modular companies on the books, but the most responsive was William Scotsman. And at that point, we're just talking about full replacement. We were basing that fully on EMG's assessment and conditions. When they came out on site, they said the main building was in good shape. It's a brand new building. We couldn't lease one in such a good shape because it has the steel members in the roof. So the shell might be your standard construction materials for modular buildings, but the interior is a solid structure. So their recommendation was just replacing the flooring and a full roof replacement, just maximize in case there was conditions with the insulation, the ceiling tiles. Of course, because it's a parceled out kind of project, we went out for different quotes for roofing and the flooring. And Modern Method was a little bit higher than William Scotsman's quote, but they allow a 10-year warranty on the roof repair, and they're local, and they can get it done for $29,000. The flooring was difficult getting folks up here to give us quotes, but you did get 2, and William Scotsman was the lowest bidder on that. And then as far as the buildings, the ancillary buildings were recommended. Those are old. We must have bought those used back in 2006 during the floods. The one facility, the shower facility, would be a brand new module with an ADA compliant bathroom and shower. Our guys need to have, or women, if we get staff members that are women for the courtyard, will be ADA compliant, and we have to have showers in the premises in case they get mixed up with some chemicals or clean up from a sewer project. So we're bringing you tonight the options. We could buy them outright, but with the SHAPE committee wrapping up, there may be an offer or chance that we relocate or do something completely different out there. So instead of replacing the large facility, we would just lease the 2 ancillary buildings for the next 3 years. And the beauty of it, they still have their tow bars on them, and there's enough space in between the old shipping containers down there at the courtyard for them to just come in there and pull those old trailers out. And the other anomaly is that we're going to go for a 40-foot length secondary ancillary building. Right now there's an 8x28 and an 8x20. It leaves like a 10-foot gap in between the buildings, so we're going to close that gap so there's no potential for folks to fall off the decking that just has a little strap across it at this point. So it will improve safety elements out there as well, and give us some options down the line.
Okay.
And with that, the recommended actions are listed in front of you as far as budget transfers. The funds are eligible for impact fees. Since the different staff members out there are dispersed different across the general, sewer, and water funds, that's why those numbers are split up the way they are.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any questions?
I do recall that the city manager dispatched me during a heavy rain to go out there, and I reported back that it was raining harder inside the building than outside the building. It was sad to see, and I'm very happy they got the tarp on top of the roof. I've seen that as well, but I think these are terrific recommendations. Is there any public comment? I don't see that there is. Is there any further staff comment with respect to this?
I would just like to make one comment that I'm fully in favor. I also just think we need to think about a policy that make sure we don't get in this position again, for all our buildings in terms of deferred maintenance, so that we're ahead of things in the future. And so if there's some way to memorialize something about making sure we're being proactive about buildings, just something so that we start moving in that direction.
The financial term is sinking funds, so far, as much as the city from time to time has tried to establish sinking funds, our financial situation has been such that we've not been successful.
But even if we don't have the sinking funds, if we just have the identification that there's a problem with the roof going in a certain direction, that we recognize it early, and if we have to look for the funds then, if we don't have the sinking fund in place, at least we've identified a problem before it gets worse. So.
I don't think the problem at the corporate yard is newly identified. I think that's been known for many, many years.
It's been identified for a long time.
Yeah. Ms. Copperstein?
You're going to see some of this come out of the SHAPE committee because some of the information that came from EMG was recommendations about the amount of money we needed to be setting aside to be maintaining things. You'd be surprised, even some things you think are in pretty good shape need money. So the committee's been working off a spreadsheet of available dollars that include, line item for just that sort of thing.
I think Jeff makes a good point in terms of being able to continually identifying the problems. Obviously, we're as city council members, we make budget decisions every year, and we prioritize where those funds go. So the more information that this council and future councils have, the better we're going to be. So that, to me, that makes sense from a process point of view. Always keeping on track of, we have to maintain everything. Okay, what's the plan?
Right. I agree with that also, and I think that also begs to be looking at what revenues we need for moving forward and being able to fund a sinking fund continuously.
Right.
Not only in emergencies. So.
In any event, at this point, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Hopos? Getting more
Vice
comfortable
Mayor.
with that last name. Be
Vice-
wary.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Coverstein?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. And that takes us to the last matter, I think, which was added to our agenda dealing with the Turley project. And I see Mr. Coman is here, and let me turn it over to Mr. Hausch initially, and then
Thank you, Mayor Galbraith, council members of the public. The item before the council tonight is consideration of a request from Calistoga Affordable Housing that the city provide an additional loan of up to $135,000 from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to the Turley Flats Affordable Housing Project located at 1105 Pope Street for a total trust fund contribution of $835,000. There's a significant amount of background on this project, which is identified in the staff report. Staff will just skip to January 31st of 2017 when the City Council considered and approved a request to increase the overall loan amount to the project to $700,000. There were several loan and regulatory documents associated with that action. Shortly after that, the Napa County Board of Supervisors also approved a similar loan to the project of up to $650,000. And that action resulted in an agreement to transfer 2 credits from the city's Regional Housing Needs Assessment allocation, from the county to the city. So you'll see in the next housing element cycle, we will pick up 2 of the county's allocations, but that's just background as of today. According to Calistoga Affordable Housing, in addition to that funding, they had secured a bank loan for $1.4 million and an additional grant from the Gasser Foundation of $150,000. That brings us to tonight. Calistoga Affordable Housing is requesting an increase in their approved trust fund loan for up to an additional $135,000. The actual request was $130,000 and change, and staff rounded it up to address any potential contingencies. For their what they've identified as a need to complete the Turley Flats 8-unit multifamily housing project at 1105 Pope Street. Mr. Coleman, the executive director, is here, and he'll chat about this item briefly or present further, but he identified a number of unanticipated construction costs associated with the development of the project. Some of these resulted from unanticipated costs due to the discovery of low levels of contamination on the site, fuel contamination, the need to winterize the site to allow the construction to move forward through the winter months. They were obviously delayed, which meant a late start to getting the project underway. It's buttoned up. It looks well now. I'm sure many of you have seen the project in its current state, which is under construction. And then they've identified a number of other issues which have driven up their cost of construction. If the council chooses to approve this document or this request, several of the documents that were previously approved would have to be revised, including the loan agreement, promissory note, deed of trust, intercreditor agreement, regulatory agreement, et cetera. But the action before the council tonight is just a yes or no on the loan, and then giving us authority to make those necessary changes to incorporate the funding. It's worth noting that Calistoga Affordable Housing has submitted several grant applications seeking other sources of funds, but given the uncertainty of those and the timing and the immediate need for funding, the bank has actually identified this shortfall as a justification for holding back their funds, and so we brought this forward on a relatively short item or short agenda notification period. The council could direct staff to seek repayment of portions of these funds if they get awards from some of those other applications. And then just one further note, it's worth noting that the city is anticipating occupancy of these units this year to comply with the Calderon settlement. So just, again, we discussed it previously, but it's important to staff bring that up to everyone's attention. So the fiscal impact associated with this request would obviously be a direct cost to the trust fund of an additional $135,000. Denying the request also has potential general fund implications resulting from Calderon. As mentioned, the total balance in the trust fund is $430,064 as of this week. And finally, with that, it's recommended by the Planning and Community Improvement Department that the council approve the request and provide the increased loan amount for up to an additional $135,000 for the Turley Flats Affordable Housing Project at 1105 Pope. Available for questions, and Mr. Coleman is here to further add to the discussion.
Okay. Mr. Croman, would you like to speak to this?
In an effort to keep it short, I've written it out.
All right.
Make sure I don't miss anything. First, CEH appreciates the support of the city, as well as the general community and the county for the Turley project. From the many phone calls and the looky-loos that come by the project each day, there is no doubt about the strong community interest in this project. As the council started this evening, Mr. Turley came into the council and handed me an envelope and said, please make the council aware of what this is. So when I opened it up, it was a $5,000 check. I did not ask Mr. Turley for these funds. I did make him aware that we were coming before the council and ask if he could be present as we keep in constant contact with Mr. Turley, because without his help and things, this project wouldn't have been started. So I imagine the City Council is not surprised that CEH is back again asking for more funding for this project. One of the questions CEH continually hears is you can't really build the Turley project for just $229 a square foot. The bank has really been after us on this particular question. And frankly, we have to agree. We also want to give you our perspective on why this is true and why is it taking more funding to complete. I think all of us can agree that the construction of housing in Napa County is more than expensive. Frankly, this is one of the core reasons why there is currently a housing shortage in the Up Valley. It's not just a shortage of affordable housing, there is a shortage of housing. And the core reason for it is the cost. CH believes that we can find at least part of the puzzle pieces in reducing unnecessary cost. Concepts such as modular construction, the design and build teams are at the core of our puzzle pieces. We have made good progress on some of these concepts and have had to rethink better solutions on others. Here are the core reasons of why we are here tonight. Number one, time delays. On April 1, 2017, we concluded our groundbreaking ceremony. However, we couldn't achieve a financial agreement between the city, county, and bank on how to spend the construction money. That took 4 months. I think you can understand the challenge of harmonizing 3 large independent organizations' working policies regarding money. It took 14 underwriters, lawyers, and support staff to get the agreement completed. This is not a criticism or a throwing of stones, but it is a reality of how important little details in organization and construction are. The fear of liability and lawsuits is the basic driver of these delays. Everyone is afraid that something is going to happen if they do something. But a 4-month process causing a costly delay is a problem for us, because that meant that we had to go into winter. We were anticipating that the project would be over and done with by August. We didn't even get started until August. For the Turley project, all the pre-planning by Helmer and Sons and the Hybrid Core organization regarding construction scheduling to complete the project within 4 months' time was lost, and the project now had to face doing site work in a potentially bad weather environment. The time delay effects are still with us and is the cause for CH being here tonight. The time delays also cost CH more in insurance premiums, performance bond fees, loan interest, etc., etc. The delay added $17,000 to our factory bill, keeping in mind that we originally signed the contract for the factory in 2015, and they kept holding it at that same amount until August of 2017. They told us we can't wait any longer. We've had increases, we have to give them to you. Plan changes during the permit process. The way our contracts work with Helmer and Sons is that as long as it's on the plans, that is what they will do for this cost that they agreed to. When a plan change is made, that may increase or decrease costs. From the beginning of the project, CH has maintained and found documented code backup that a 3-story, multi-story building using modular factory-built units didn't require a traditional concrete platform to place the factory units upon. Because of the strength built into the factory units, the floor joist assemblies provide additional strength, thus eliminating the need for a concrete platform. The buildings sit on piers that are sunk 20 to 25 foot into the ground. The concept was originally approved by our engineers, architects, and the city staff in 2015. However, during the plan checks, which involved state, city, and a third-party plan review consultant, the foundation plans were changed by adding more piers and concrete supports connecting the piers. The plan changes regarding the foundation requirements are listed in change order number 3 for a total of $131,000. You'll note that our request tonight is very close to that same amount. Along with the foundation plan changes, the street improvement section of the plans were also changed by adding additional requirements. The total is in the change order number 3. Contaminated soil. Though the soil contamination problem only cost us $25,000, it did delay the project at a critical time period. We were in the middle of drilling the deep pier holes when we made the discovery. It wasn't hard to discover because the smell of gasoline as the water came up was pretty difficult to avoid. The stoppage delayed the completion of the foundation work during a good weather time, and it lasted for 3 weeks. It also happened during a time period when Napa and Sonoma counties were overwhelmed with the work of sending fire-related items from the 2 counties to specialized hazardous waste sites. Trying to schedule trucks and to get into the waste sites was a challenge. But we appreciate the work that Helmer's did by only restricting us for a total wait of about 2 weeks. CH is not saying the plan checks shouldn't have been made and those changes, or that the changes were wrong. But our reality is that those plan changes resulted in an additional cost of $132,000. Additional costs on items that we thought had been resolved. The net of all the other 4 change orders was $11,000. We continually look for ways that we can save money on this project. That combined with the underground soil contamination from the off-site gasoline leak totaled less than $36,000. Our $150,000 contingency budget, backed up with cash from the Gasser Foundation, wasn't large enough to handle the unusual cost charged on the change order number 3. We would like to point out that our loan increase request is almost equal to that same amount. We are not here to complain, and we certainly don't want the council to feel that we are ungrateful. But we need to ask for financial assistance in order to complete the project. This project is important to the city of St. Helena, it's important to us, and it's important to the workforce of St. Helena. We'll be very happy to answer any questions.
Let me see whether there's any public comment. No public comment. Are there any questions for Mr. Cole?
I'm curious whether your budget includes dipping into the contingencies the contingency monies that you've budgeted. Does this include using those contingency funds?
The contingency, our budget included a $150,000 contingency. Mm-hmm. The contingency was for unknown, because we felt our contracts were safe and solid. It was basically for unknowns that we put that in there.
But I think the question that's being asked is whether you've now dipped into the actual contingency due to unknowns, and how much have you dipped into it, or for any other reason?
Well, we haven't actually dipped into it, but we have to show the total projected cost.
Right.
The bank has said that unless we have to come up with 100% of the anticipated cost before they give any money. So even though we have money available, we haven't nearly used it all, and we still have the $150,000 contingency, the bank has made the statement that they will not release any funds until we make up that projected cost difference.
I don't find that unusual. I mean, when a loan goes out of balance like this, you're usually required to make up the difference. I do have a question about the contingency itself, though. You're showing $150,000 on your worksheet.
Yes.
And you have 60 from us and 65 from the county. Where's the other 25? It's not evident to me where there's another 25,000 of contingency funds.
I'm sorry, I don't follow what you're saying there.
On your calculation of your total increased costs,
yes,
then you have a line item of minus contingency funds, and it's minus $150,000.
Okay.
60 of that
should probably be interpreted as not a minus, but that is what we had put in reserve for contingency.
So in addition to our 60 and the county's 65, which is 125, you do have another 25,000 somewhere.
Those are basically holdbacks. They're counted as already being paid. I mean, as being spent. They're just a 10% holdback that can't be spent until we come to the end of the project.
Maybe I'm not asking the question clearly. Where is the 150,000?
It's in the bank.
Okay, the bank that is the lender.
Bank required that we had to deposit that money with them.
Okay, so this does not include our 60, which has not yet been...
Yes, it does include it.
Okay. I guess I don't understand how it includes... Our 60 has not been dispersed.
That's correct, and the county has $65,000 they have not dispersed. And then the question is, and you have $150,000 in the bank?
That's correct. What we're saying is, in our total budgeting, we are now projecting we will be $100 $118,000 beyond all monies that are accounted for. And the bank is saying they will not release anything until we come up with that additional money.
Well,
So we haven't spent it. We are projecting to spend it.
I understand what you're saying. I'm just trying to figure out where the various pots of money are.
Well, the pots
If
of money
all
are
of the money is dispersed under the original loans, including the so-called holdbacks, which I think we called contingency funds, we in our own documents,
Okay.
I think we called them that. That's part of my confusion.
Okay.
Basically, if all of the money is dispersed, you are
No, it's not
roughly
dispersed.
118,000 short, correct?
When all the money is dispersed, it hasn't been dispersed.
Right.
The county still has 65,000.
Right.
City still has. The bank has 1.4 million plus 150,000. That's what they have right now. We haven't spent any of the bank's money. We just sent them the first bill when they told us that they wouldn't pay anything until we showed that we had 100% of all projected costs. They had to have that money in their bank.
And still leaving the contingency intact.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it reads to me as though you have to use the contingency to fully fund the project. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, but usually you don't use the contingency until the end of the project.
Correct.
But it's anticipated. It's not like we're
Right.
going to get that 60. It's going to be spent.
Mhm.
And so is the 65 from the county.
The project budget did anticipate that.
Right.
Okay.
Did the construction contract have a contingency?
The construction contract was based on whatever's on the plans. That's what they will do. Okay, so there wasn't any need for a contingency on that. They looked to us if they ran into unknowns that were not on the plans. Then they looked to us to come up with that money.
And that happens through the change order process.
Pardon?
And that's what happens through the change order process, presumably.
Yes, that is the change order process. And that's what has gotten us. We've been doing the change orders, but they put in, when they first got the plans that came back from the building permit, they looked on it and they said, there's a lot on here that were not on the original plans. And so they went to work and they costed it out. And then they sent me that change order. And I said, I can't sign this change order yet because I have no way of funding it. And I need to have you take a look at it, see if there's any way you can reduce what you're talking about here. That should give us time to do further investigation on it. And they did that until a month ago. Then the bank got a copy of the change order number 3, which I hadn't signed yet, and said, because of this, we're now going to withhold our money until you come up with the cash for this change order.
One of the things that came up the last time I seem to remember we talked is what order the entities get paid back.
Yes.
And so on something like this, where would we sit in that order?
You're first.
Okay, on something like this?
You and the county were first to pay out. The bank, according to those instructions that they worked out, they would be paid last.
Yeah, we spent the city funds first, and a repayment comes last to the city.
Right.
So to your question, the city's money sits last in place.
Right.
Okay.
Don't expect to see any money.
Well, the bank always comes first.
You know, I don't see that there's much we can do but fund this, but I do think there are some lessons, to be learned here. I mean, normally a construction contract would have a contingency in it. There would be an extra 10% or more in there to address change orders and things like that, so that when they came up, you weren't in such a bind that you had to go search for more money. The whole project would have been based on the construction contract itself having that.
But we did. That's why we added the $150,000. But it wasn't. It wasn't in the contractor's contract.
It was like in your pocket.
It was in our budgets.
And, you know, as for the time delay, this was a complicated project with 3 different agencies, or 2 agencies and a bank funding. And personally, I think the time delay that happened in the spring was absolutely necessary so that we all knew what we were doing and where we stood vis-a-vis each other as far as funding this and who was in first position. And I just think the next time around, this would happen differently. And lastly, you know, of the money that we are loaning here, $835,000, nearly $150,000 of that is our own fees. And I think as we move forward with our housing white paper and our discussions, I think we really have to think about getting into the habit of waiving fees, particularly on projects for affordable housing. We're piling $20,000, $25,000 per unit cost on top of every housing unit that is being built.
To begin with, that's the procedure that we started with the city. They were going to allocate, I think it was $158,000 for fees and that type of thing. Then they changed, and everything became a loan. And so that, what you were suggesting is the way it was started.
Well, we went with the loan, to save you from maybe having prevailing wage issues. But as a separate matter, we have the ability, I believe, and maybe going forward as we get into some of these policies that come out of the white paper, to consider just setting a across-the-board policy that waives things in certain instances, which would help with the cost, no doubt.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions of Mr. Froman? Thank you very much.
What is the staff's recommendation?
Staff's recommending that the council approve the request for the $135,000, delegating the authority to enter and modify all the associated documents to the city manager. However, we are happy to bring those back if the council would like to see them. No changes are anticipated other than the increased amount. And then if the council directs some policies and provisions that would allow us to seek reimbursement should Mr. or Calistoga Affordable Housing receive any of the grants that have been filed for in the meantime, or the contingencies not be utilized.
I'd make the motion with the additional proviso that we're able to get any new monies from grants or any other kinds of monies that come through.
Second.
I would only add, though, that I don't want any proviso along these lines to hurt the ability of CAH to get the grants in the first place. I'm concerned about that. I don't know whether that's a real issue or not. These things get awfully complicated.
Mm-hmm. Staff will work with the attorney's office to craft the appropriate language and requirements into the agreements. But again, I think the concern is we don't want to overfund the project. We want as much money into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund as possible for future projects.
All right.
Correct.
You know, the amendment itself can be relatively simple. I mean, you can often draft one document that globally amends everything, so we don't have to go through all those documents again with red lines. We're basically changing the loan amount.
Yeah. All right. Is there a second to the motion? I did. Oh, you did. All right. Roll call.
Would Councilmember Doran repeat your motion?
No. That's your job. The staff's recommendation.
With additional provisions to seek repayment if Calistoga Affordable Housing receives any grant or supplemental funding.
Well said. That's my motion.
And I second that.
All right, roll call, please.
Councilmember Doring.
Yes.
Vice Mayor White.
Yes.
Councilmember Ellsworth.
Yes.
Coverstein.
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith.
Yes. Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Tillman. And we hope not to see you again.
Grand opening.
Until the groundbreaking.
Ribbon cutting.
Grand opening.
That's right.
So what is a contingency after it's no longer contingent?
Yeah.
Okay, that concludes our. That concludes our. That concludes our meeting. Thanks very much.